very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today, we'll be looking at the national budget, and we know very well that on Thursday last week, Parliament passed the national budget. There are figures there, there are allocations, and today I have experts here in studio who are going to share with us in details about what this budget means for this country, the figures, and the implications for the different key sectors. Remember, this budget is very important in terms of implementing the fourth National Development Plan, where the government kickstarts that agenda of growing the economy tenfold. So two guests in studio today to discuss this national budget. Mr. Julius Mukunda, economist and executive director at the Civil Society Budget Advocates Group. Good evening.
Good evening.
So
good evening, listeners.
Also in studio, Dr. Ezra Muhumuza Rubanda. He's also an economist, executive director, Uganda Manufacturers Association. Good evening, sir. Pleasure having you here.
Good evening to you, Kenneth, and good evening to our listeners.
And I want to encourage the listeners to be part of this discussion, to share with us their thoughts via the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090, and your comments will be read out during the course of this discussion. Let me begin with the budget man, that is Mr. Julius Mukunda, who lives and eats the budget. And Dr. Julius Mukunda, after a tedious exercise, Parliament finally appropriated the 2026-2027 national budget. What's very critical in this budget that you would want to share with the listener of Spectrum?
Yes, thanks, Kenneth, and good evening, our listeners. We are celebrating this finishing with the budget process, and I think every Ghanaian out there needs to understand that it is really a very protracted process. Everybody wants something to be funded, and at the same time, very few people want something to be taxed. So the government has really a very, very, very difficult position in ensuring that everything is budgeted for, but very few are willing also to pay the taxes. But I'm glad that we are out of it. We have our 84.39 trillion Ugandan shillings that government of Uganda has put in place to spend for the next financial year. Have in mind that the current financial that we are ending was 72 trillion, but it was revised to 80. So basically, we added just a 4 point something trillion Ugandan shillings. Notably is, of course, the question is where is the money coming from? Of course, Uganda Revenue Authority has been given a very huge task of collecting 39.9 trillion Ugandan shillings. That's around 40 trillion. But also is that, and this is an increment from 33.9 trillion Ugandan shillings. So Uganda Revenue Authority has been given a very serious target. At the same time is that we are going to get some money from the Petroleum Fund, around 1.4 trillion. So we are beginning now to enjoy the petroleum money. And of course, this is the result of some of the incomes that we are getting from our fund. We are going to borrow around 11 trillion. And I think probably that's something where we'll be able to ask ourselves what next, because domestic financing is around 11 trillion. At the same time is that we are likely to be able to borrow around 12.4 trillion Ugandan shillings. This one also includes loans and also some grants that we are going to have. So that's where the money is coming from. Out of that money, of course, is that out of 84 trillion Ugandan shillings is that 39.2 trillion Ugandan shillings is money that is discretion, that is available for government to spend. And that is around 46.5% of the entire government budget. What do I mean is that out of 84, already there are some monies that have been allocated, you can't touch it. So we only are remaining with 39, you can say 40 trillion Ugandan shillings that we are likely to spend, available for government to spend on its own. The other...
To spend on what now? Because there's always the development budget and also the other side that you always talk about, which is consumptive.
This is... When I say discretionary, out of the 84, it means that the other money is already committed. For example, it's going to debt servicing. Money for debt servicing, you can't say I'm budgeting for it. No, it's not yours. It's already taken. So out of 84 trillion, government of Uganda has got only 39.2 trillion to spend. That we shall spend on our salaries, on our non-wage bill, medicines, roads, and all others. But the rest of that money is already gone. Listeners might want to know exactly what this 45 trillion entails, because you want to know where does this money go if we are not going to spend it, if it has already been allocated. One of the monies is around domestic refinancing. Domestic financing is around 13 trillion. What does that mean? It means that these are debts that are likely to mature in the next financial year, but we are rolling this debt over in another financial year. In business,
meaning that we are unable to pay right now.
In business, you negotiate, you restructure your loan, and it is okay if you are restructuring your loan, but you must make sure that on an annual basis, this restructuring reduces. So there is that 13.9. But I think what we should be interested in is that we have allocated 14 trillion Ugandan shillings for interest rate payment. 14 trillion Ugandan shillings in interest rate payment. And that I think Kenneth is going to touch on how we are managing our debt. Because 14 trillion is not just simple money. We have a debt with the Bank of Uganda, around $500 billion, which we have to pay. So you can see where it goes, but also external debt payments. That's amortization. That is the principal, the debt we have now to pay, excluding interest rate payment, and that's around 4 trillion. So these are some of the monies whereby you don't need to negotiate. Even the parliament can't touch it. You need to be able to pay that particular money. So in this budget, of course, there are losers, there are also winners. And I can tell you that some of us, we are very happy with some of the allocations that have been made, but we still believe that there were some budget fats that we should have cut to be able to allocate it to some of the areas that we need. Today, as I moved from Ntinda to here, it took me an hour and 20 minutes. This is a journey that should take you probably like 25 minutes. Why? Because the roads are congested. There are potholes everywhere. So I'm happy to see that the government has now allocated almost 1.3 trillion, especially for this is for meter gauge railway, but KCC road and drainage has been allocated 111 billion Ugandan shillings. So I'm hoping that really in the next financial year we can have less potholes, but also we can have smooth and nicer roads that we can be able to do. I'm glad that 918 billion has been allocated for district urban and community access roads. These are the small roads we have in our small districts. So definitely it is an area that you find yourself very happy that money has been allocated. So there are a number of money. Emyoga is coming back. PDM is coming back. We are seeing recapitalization of UDB and all other wealth creation programs. So, yes, my message today is to tell Ugandans, please get prepared to take up these opportunities that are in the budget. They can never find in your bedroom. You have to get out and prepare yourself to ensure that you can take advantage of some of these new opportunities.
All right. Compared to the past budgets, what would you say?
Compared to the past budget, of course, this one is a bigger cake. That's number one. At the same time, I'm seeing more resources being targeted towards growth areas, especially roads. We are seeing an increment in human capital development, and that is health and education, I think, which for me is very critical and very important. We are seeing tourism the budget has increased. Remember, we used to give tourism 200 billion. Now these guys have almost $500 billion. I'm hoping that it can boost our tourism sector, because remember, tourism really is one of the sectors that brings in lots of money.
All right. Before I bring in Dr. Ezra, one thing you talked about at the beginning is the revision of the budget from the original figure it was on and then to another. That matter, very many Ugandans don't understand it. What exactly happens? Why do we always have to revise the budget?
Because a budget figure should not be a moving target, and I think that this is where I think government really needs to sort itself out. You can't come up with 69 trillion at the budget framework paper, then all of the sudden it goes to 78 at the ministerial policy paper. It goes to 84 at the reading of the estimates in the parliament.
Appropriation.
But even at the last minute, when you're trying to approve it, you bring another 900 billion to be included into the budget.
Agenda.
It is an indication of that you've not planned properly. And I think that's where the argument I have given is that this national budget framework paper should be thrown out of the law. It is redundant. You can't tell people that the budget process has started 1st of July. But by November, you should provide estimates for the next year financial budget. You have not even implemented the current budget to give you lessons on what you should change, what you should drop, and what you should include in the new current budget. But 3 months down the road, you start developing a new budget. I think for me, we should give accounting officers and technocrats enough time to first implement the budget for 6 months before we start developing a new budget. And that's why I think we have these figures as moving targets. And some of them, you ask yourself, what is happening? Couldn't you have predicted this, that is going to come? So we needed to fix the way we plan and project budget figures to the public.
All right. Let's bring in Dr. Rubanda, the manufacturer. Those days when we used to listen to budget speeches, these are some of the key stakeholders who never left their radio sets to understand the dynamics, things that are changing and those that are not changing. But having looked at the figures that have been put in this particular budget and also the comments that we have heard from Mr. Julius Mukunda, as a manufacturer, what's your take about this budget?
Thank you, Kenneth. The difference that a manufacturer has with any other stakeholder in the budget is that he feels the direct impact of raising the bigger part of the budget, or what we would call the revenue to put into the budget. You see, when the budget figures come, we are normally concerned with the expenditure part of the budget. But the real sense is in the income part of the budget. And why the manufacturers feel it is very important that the interrogation of that part be done very comprehensively is that from the taxpayer's point of view, you cannot wake up and you say that today what you have planned and it has evidence and has basis, 2 days later it is escalating by more than 20%. That tells you that the planning apparatus is wanting. Because for us, when you are talking about a slight increase in the tax, it's not about the figures. It's the incidence that is going to create in the entire chain of production. It's going to create what we call the tax impact. But you realize that figures are being played around as people wish. And that is where our bigger concern comes in. We are trying to say, for instance, on the taxation part of it, that we expected government to quickly realize the impasse we are facing as a country. When these initial proposals were being done,
The tax
measures, especially the exercise duty levies, the increments that were done, were based on the basis that especially the housing and construction sector was fast growing. And therefore, government thought it wise that they increase taxes on some of the raw materials in construction. They are talking of textile, tiles, cement,
grout,
paint, grout, plastics, which was initially okay, you would think. But along the way, we got to the issue of the USA war on Iran. And it is affecting the supply of the raw materials that construct these intermediary materials that we send to construction sector. We would have expected actually a reversal on some of those proposals. And we've made an attempt to reach out and say, look, it's not enough to come up with good figures when we actually know as a country we may not be able to raise this money that is required at expenditure. Because you've seen a convergence of lobbyists moving into finance, to parliament, to all circles where budget figures are determined, to try to increase the allocation. Fine, but no one is going in to increase the revenue. No one is coming up with good measures of how to increase revenue. Now, we are trying to say taxation is never bad. But we must look at the context under which it is going to operate.
Well, there's somebody out there who will say the manufacturer should not be complaining. They are going to increase the price of the commodities and people will still want to construct.
And that is why we are saying, Kenneth, that let someone present evidence where research has been done and a model has been developed that shows that actually the incidence of this tax is going to be insignificant in price changes, that it won't create changes in prices.
So you're scared about increasing the prices?
Once you increase taxes that are not well-based, that's why we are saying, and we want to challenge government to really engage their research departments and come up with an incidence. They say that once we increase this is how it's going to portray to the final consumer. This is how it's going to portray in terms of prices, and therefore production will not be impacted. But what we are noting right now is that there is an urge to raise revenue without undertaking the due process to calculate the impact. And we think that it won't have impact. And for us who are really into the real labor room in terms of manufacturing, we are already seeing these effects.
All right. It's very important for us also to discuss the other way. We are looking at industrialization as a very critical aspect of the Fourth National Development Plan. And this budget is very critical in kickstarting that agenda of growing the economy tenfold. Are you seeing movement in that direction?
Fantastic. We've seen increment in road network. We've seen increase in power, production of and distribution of power. These are catalysts for industrialization. We are again seeing increment in tourism, allocation of tourism. Tourism is one thing that actually is our consumer as industrialists. When we increase tourism and hotels are working, we'll see supplies going into these hotels. These are very good discussions and these are very good attempts. But we are saying that as government is trying to increase these taxes, in some areas they are becoming over-ambitious. The realities are not being looked at realistically. That is the argument that manufacturers are holding. For instance, had it been considerable in terms of context, no one would be telling an increase, would be suggesting, not even to think, an increase in any taxes for any of petrochemical raw materials. Why? Because petrochemical raw materials we know are being affected by the movement on the sea. So that is why we're saying, had we been considerate, there are some of these things that would have been revised early enough. Yet we had time. We had time because by the time this was drafted, somewhere in October, November, December, the war had not broken on.
But Dr. Ezra, these are the traditional areas where government actually collects taxes every now and then, every financial year.
And it's the same reason...
Where would you want the government to
It's
go?
the same reason why we've not discussed this before. We are discussing the increase in exercise duty for those materials. This is when we have had this discussion. We have had these changes and we are not there. But there are certain salient issues that we think right now, as a country, we may need to rethink. Because our biggest issue is here, Kenneth. Increase for Uganda, where we know we are a hinterland, we are not going to get affected the same way Tanzania, that is a border, a sea bordering country, and Kenya, the way this oil and petrochemical raw material problem is hitting them, is we are worse off. And then we were saying, once they have better, I would say, impact, when it impacts them lesser than it is impacting us, we are going to see proliferation of materials, of products from these countries, and we are going to lose the little market that we have. We are going to have smuggling increasing because we all know how porous our borders are. We all know how people are very creative just out there. We'll see illicit trade continuing. Had we had a trade order that we know that what is determined within is not going to be affected by what is outside, then we'd be saying, okay. But right now, for instance, we have had Kenya reduce their VAT from 16 to 6%. Now, that tells you that whatever is being produced in Kenya is relatively cheaper compared to what we're producing in this country.
All right. Well, let me get back to you, Mr. Julius Mukunda. You just read out the figures there about our debt burden. And in order for a country to become self-sustainable, we must tax. And you hear from the manufacturer, who by far are the biggest, could be among the biggest, tax contributors in our economy. And now they are saying those taxes that have been proposed, the tax measures for the next financial year, are not good enough. They should have been reconsidered. Where does this leave the country? You don't want us to borrow. You want us to raise revenues locally. But at the same time, we have key stakeholders who are saying our tax policies need to change.
Okay. A tax policy has so many purposes. Among them, of course, is to collect revenue for the government. The other part also is to prohibit a particular behavior. And I will stick to those two things. When you say, I want to collect revenue, it's a target. So you can start taxing each and everything on the planet Earth because it's a target. But where a tax policy really, by the time you bring in a tax policy, you need to first understand how is this likely to affect the production and the productivity of your economy. Because we have been giving an example. Is it better to tax a tree or the products of the tree? Because at the end of the day is that if you want to tax the product of the tree, then you are going to have so many trees that are going to be grown and you get the products out. So it's the same thing with businesses. The petrochemicals we are talking about, and I think I was reading about the plastic granules, the granules that are imported in this country for purposes of so many activities that can come out of it. For example, the packaging part. Packaging in this country is a huge deal on how to package. Production of plastics. So many things that you need these plastics for. Now, you are going to make it expensive for them to be utilized. What does that mean? It means that the industries, the factories, are either likely to close, reduce production, reduce employment, and therefore it backfires in terms of how much you're going to be taxing on the corporate tax, pay, VAT, and or even including excess duty you are looking at. If
there would be a chain reaction.
Yes, a chain reaction. If that was your target then, if you wanted to collect more money, you could have actually reduced so that you can increase the production. Because when you increase production, that means that you are going to get more people being employed. And therefore that is pay done already. The volumes of imports are also going to be much. So you are going to have more VAT, more excise duty. So the import duty is actually going to increase for you. So sometimes I ask myself, where do these ideas come from? But you ask the fundamental question. If you don't tax and you have a huge debt and you are very conscious even about debt, what should you do? It is not rocket science. I have told the URA, for example, I said, not everybody is in taxation bracket. Out of the 5 million people in tax register, only 2 million are active. So probably the others are not making money. But we also know that not everybody actually is paying taxes. Why? Because URA's capacity to collect tax from each and every person, from each and every border point, is quite limited. Even if we give them another 1 trillion shillings for URA to collect taxes, they will never do that. So URA needs to work with the districts on these porous borders, in this district, for them to be able to say, we can actually collect for you rental tax. And the rental tax actually will be able to be proud back. So it is a question of understanding how do you ensure that each and every person in the taxation bracket. So let us ensure we expand the taxation base without increasing the rates. And he rightly said, this was a year, if I was a ministry, if I was a government, not to talk about any tax increment, because the timing was extremely very bad. But most importantly, that the current taxation regime actually was showing that the GDP was actually increasing. During the next year is the first time we are predicting a double-digit growth in terms of GDP, because things probably are working. So for me, that's number one. Let us ensure that those who are not paid are actually into the taxation bracket. But also you also need to look at the expenditure. What are you spending on? You see, also taxation targets are being driven by too much appetite to spend. What are those things we can say for today? let us put them aside for tomorrow. We try and spend them later. I'm not the right guy to say this one is not important, but I can tell you there are things we can say, let us postpone for the next financial year.
All right. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue reflecting on the 2026-2027 national budget. I have two officials, key stakeholders in matters of the budget. Dr. Ezra Muhumuza Rubanda is an economist and executive director, Uganda Manufacturers Association. They command a big share of contribution to our budget in terms of taxation. They are the manufacturers. They make the goods that are sold from which the government taxes. Also in studio, Mr. Julius Mukunda, the budget man, economist and executive director at the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. Keep your comments coming by the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. Spectrum continues after. We're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are looking at the national budget 2026-2027. So we are doing the stakeholders' perspectives on that particular budget, which was passed by Parliament on Thursday last week. The budget was revised, like Mr. Mukunda told us. The figures kept on changing until we came to 84.3 trillion shillings, you know, and there's been one of the major talking points about why the government revises the budget from here and there. And also in studio, I have Dr. Ezra Muhumuza Rubanda, economist and executive director, Uganda Manufacturers Association, and Mr. Julius Mukunda, who you just had a few seconds there. He's an economist and also executive director at the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. Now, let's come back to you, Dr. Ezra Rubanda. Of course, Julius had talked about the winners and the losers. And I'd also ask you to comment on that issue of, the Fourth National Development Plan. We're expecting a lot in terms of investment. And I'm seeing implementation of the Fourth National Development Plan takes a lion's share of this particular budget. But of course, we know the perennial issues, the problems that we always have in terms of implementation, the budget discipline. Looking at what has been said and what has happened in the past, are you hopeful that finally we are going to move? Because you talked about some of the good things that you're seeing there in the budget. But what about our perennial challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth. I think I need to put this in context and very clear. Budget is a statement. Its implementation determines its impact. And the entire discussion, most of the time, we want to discuss the figures on the paper. But the real impact of a budget, because budget is a management tool of an economy, lies in how you define, manage the context within which it operates. Now, right now, we have some aspects of economic context that may not allow this budget to realize the desired goals. One, you cannot draw a budget while you are in a region and you think you're going to operate in a separate or in an isolated manner. This budget has not put into consideration the bigger environment within which it's going to operate. That is context issue number one. That it is too much inward looking and it's not looking outside. That's, I hinted already, that we needed to know how it compares with the neighboring countries in terms of each of these tax measures, so that it does not benefit other economies. The context number two is, do we have enough financing for production sector that will trigger the gross revenue from which we will get tax and from which tax will get money to finance the budget? So on that particular one is that when you look at the interest rate within which we can borrow, we are doing not very good. And in these proposals, you must have seen someone who was talking of even putting in a withholding tax on money that has been loaned into this economy from outside. You realize, you say, 5% on the good money you've gotten from outside. Now you want to add tax to it. What does it mean? That if we have been getting 1 trillion from outside to augment our domestic financing, now we are going to have that one closed out. Why? Because we want to put in tax on it. And remember, when you define your context and you know yourself, then you operate better. Where we stand as a country, our credit index rates us at C-. Yes, out there, we are rated among the least developing countries. No one would want to give us their money.
If the Minister of Finance would disagree with that.
We'll disagree.
You know very well.
They will disagree.
A team of the Minister of Finance has just been in Washington at the annual World Bank spring meetings.
You see,
and they came back.
Listen to this.
Everybody tends to be interested in giving us money.
When we are getting money for government, because it is 100% insured, it is cheaper, and you will get the tendency to believe that actually out there is money coming in. But for us who are in the private sector, we know for you to go to a commercial bank out there and you say, I need to borrow money, they will either tell you, increase the insurer's rate, or go back and get a clearance from your government as insurance. Now, the cost of getting money for private development is not as cheap. It is not as easy as we want to think.
Well,
now,
Mr. Julius,
when you had
has just talked about capitalizing UDB.
We have been in this studio, we have been in this country, and we have discussed capitalization of UDB. Then there is a simple question. Why are we getting money from outside if there is money in UDB? I don't speak for UDB, but I pose just a generic question. If there is cheap money, who enjoys going to get money from outside? Then why would you suggest that there is what? There is loan that is coming in. By the fact that the government is thinking of taxing loans that are coming in, it means it is aware there is loans which are coming in. Then it means it is aware that actually domestically our financial market is still very expensive. And that is why I am saying realistically we need to know where we lie. Point number 3, in terms of budget management, I have spoken again and again that we still have fiscal indiscipline. Fiscal discipline requires that when you get this money, the bigger chunk of it be put into productive sector. But we still see a lot of money into the consumptive sector. Number 2, when it comes to how we issue out this money, so long as it is in the budget, we've seen money being dished out, sometimes unnecessarily. We have had arguments where we've seen, they call them what, supplementaries, being raised from nowhere, and you say, if we have just had a budget, then tomorrow for a week, we are discussing supplementaries. What was the essence of budget? All these are signs of fiscal indiscipline. As a country, we have that obligation. We don't want to target anyone. Why I keep bringing it that it's a pain, it's paining manufacturers out of this, because for them they pay directly, and the other people just use directly. So there is a disparity in the feeling, especially when they sense some signs of misuse of the money or non-prioritizing, if you want to be a little bit diplomatic. But these are some of the things. Then lastly, when we want to analyze the context, is the issue of informality. Pose a question in this country, who is paying tax and who is not paying tax? In the business sector, we've seen an outcry. Do you know, the other day in Parliament, they were putting it square of those people whose structures have been put down in the campaign for trade order. How many people they were claiming in millions? But when you ask a question, are all these people on the tax payroll? Most of the people are not paying tax. And we are saying, government, please put in effort to reduce informality. And because right now the tax burden is being shouldered by a few, most of these manufacturers, they are paying, we don't call it double tax anymore. It is quadruple taxing. We see people on withholding tax, you see them in exercise, they are talking about DTS, they are talking about DCM, and say digital conformity mark, pay. And pay to who? We have been here trying to express a question. Where do we want the government to get money, for instance? We presented last time in Parliament. For instance, on DCM, the digital conformity mark, where we are paying 21%, government only takes 6%. So you raise the question, where does 16 go? That is fiscal indiscipline we are talking about. We wish government was taking 16 and maybe any other agent for solicitation of that tax was taking 6. But when an agent for solicitation of tax is taking 16 and government is taking 6, then you say there is discipline? There is indiscipline. So people are paying taxes that are put in the tax laws. Then we have other supplementary charges. We are talking of DTS, the digital tax stamps. We are talking of digital conformity marks. We are talking of levies. Right now we are talking about skills levy. We are talking infrastructure levy. All these, when you combine them, the businessman out there says, is this really well intended? Or we are looking at one objective, which is raise revenue from taxes. So that is what is paining our manufacturers out there.
All right. Mr. Mukunda, very quickly, before we bring in the view of the listener, he raises a very important issue of indiscipline, budgeting discipline, fiscal indiscipline, and all those kind of things. And I want to put the same question I put to him. Do you have any fears about the performance of this particular budget, looking at what has happened in the past?
No, I think we...
Or you could give some advice.
No, government actually, we have been talking about this for quite some time. And this particular financial year, the government, through the Ministry of Finance, they have introduced one element of fiscal, to promote fiscal discipline. And they are calling it the budget charter, where now an accounting officer must sign that they are going to conform to the
failure. They be disciplined. Action would be taken.
Action would be taken. I am hoping that probably can work. But I think fiscal discipline is beyond even the behavior of an accounting officer. It is the way even the budget is passed. And I think I'm just being recalling. This has been the shortest period Parliament has passed the budget. If within 1 week.
Well, I saw the Minister of Finance actually congratulating Parliament for doing it so fast.
It was so fast, and I think the consultations were not as broad as they are supposed to be because everybody was in a hurry because it is an old Parliament trying to clean up and finish the job. I'm hoping that the situation should not be like that. We should have more consultation in terms of that. But I think if you get into now the figures and see where money is going and it shouldn't have gone there and where money has not gone, then you begin to ask yourself, was this a deliberate effort or it is business as usual? For example, is that there are certain elements in the budget you want really to have money to have gone there. For example, the antique vaccine. The antique vaccine required around 60, it has a funding gap of 68 billion. And you would expect that this is really, considering the other items we are spending on, you would say we would have given this amount of money to antique vaccine so that we solve the whole problem of tick-borne diseases in this country because it is a serious problem, especially to the cattle farmers. So the point I'm trying to make is that you tend to see that certain items have been left out and yet they could actually contribute to the production and the productivity because a manufacturer maybe would want hides and skin, would want to start a meat factory, would want to start, dairy, expand the dairy, but if you are not going to deal with tick-borne diseases, then you are killing any prospects of a factory coming up to say, this is where we are heading to. So those are some of the things that we want to look at. And probably would say, we've been talking about travel abroad, the 207 billion. Has there been an attempt to reduce this amount of money? Because this figure has actually remained constant in most of the things. So that's some of the things that you see. These are some of the facts we could have cut and probably add on these other items that could have immediately bring production and productivity into the economy. Some people have said, "Oh, coffee is doing well." Coffee. Do you know how much money we have invested in the coffee for the last 20 years? Just specifically on coffee production only. And now we are here because we deliberately invested in coffee. So if we want to have another example of coffee, then you need to deliberately put money into that. And I think for me, I now pity our manufacturers because these taxes really are going to run them out of business.
All right. We have feedback coming in from the listener, and I would like to read out some of the comments. Good evening, Spectrum. Thanks for the show. My comments on the topic at hand. We have for a very long time since this government came into power increased borrowing, synonymous with every budget year in, budget year out. My question, Deputy Governor, when is it coming to an end? When is this coming to an end, as we seem to be working for payment of recurrent budget? You are directing your question to the Deputy Governor, but we do not have him here. But we will hear from these people whether it's actually possible to look at that. Despite the cosmetic and impressive figures always given in the budget framework paper, there's advice by technocrats from several sectors all the time before Parliament presenting supplementary budgets. My question is, how competent are these technocrats whose projected budget supplements would increase above between 15 to 30%? Uganda, I think, this is merely a ploy using supplementary budgets as conduits to siphon taxpayers' money. Number three, as some of the economic think tanks of Uganda, haven't you noticed some of the government agencies are liable to the Ugandan taxpayer and hardly get value for money from their continued existence? Fourthly, a good parasite doesn't kill the host. The government wants to tax Ugandan taxpayers without even offering subsidies from where the revenues come from. That's say Ugandan farmers and agricultural inputs. That is Ugandan farmers and agricultural inputs and implements. All Ugandans would have loved to pay taxes, but the biggest bottleneck is the leakages from the resource envelope collected, depriving Ugandans of basic social services through corruption. That's a comment from Kamogo Fred Keita, listening in from Chira Municipality. Jimmy Abima, rising from Mukono. Good evening, Spectrum. Thanks for the show. I think where we have reached, it's only a few Ugandans, especially those who benefit from it, interested in the budget process, because by the end of it all, you are going to hear it's billions of money being allocated to Lurua Hospital every year, yet we are still flying people to our neighboring countries for treatment. Until we stop this budgeting discipline, we shall go nowhere, but continue accumulating debt. Then we have another comment from Ruanga Habat, who says, much as the Ugandan government has made efforts to allocate resources through its budgeting process, it is equally important to ensure discipline, transparency, and accountability in the utilization of the public funds. As taxpayers, we contribute significantly, often with the real sacrifice, and it's only fair that these resources are managed responsibly to deliver meaningful, visible impact to the citizens. Well, we have those comments in. Let's respond to them. I want to begin with you, Dr. Rwanda. What is your take about this? You hear the aspiration of the taxpayer.
I think they are communicating one thing, which I already hinted on to. The fiscal discipline, accountability, and being responsible when you are dealing with public funds. I think this is sort of an outcry. And as I said, some of these are taxpayers, some of them are consumers, but they are, in one way or the other, players in the chain of building the economy. Someone spoke about the vice of increasing to borrow. One indicator that an economy has lived is actually not the GDP. When I hear people say we are celebrating GDP, in my view, these are simple tertiary indicators, like looking at GDP figures. One of the primary consideration whether an economy is strong is domestication of the economy. The ability to stand shock absorbers, whether they are coming from within or they are coming from without. In respect that you can do what we call self-determination of that economy. COVID hit us, and you could see there are areas where we were sober enough to go back and solidify. But there are those where we continued to yearn for support. So when you keep borrowing and you want to become happy and look at the figures to pass, you are simply ticking boxes, but below down the table, you have a leakage. You are not solid. You will continue to be dependent. And when you look at the relationship between some of the global players in the global chain, their role is to ensure that they continue to lend to you so that they reduce your level of self-dependency. Because once you are self-dependent, you are self-determination. You are self-determining. You can determine your direction. But if you continue to rely on them and keep borrowing their funds, it means whatever policy you are talking about will always be premised on foreign interests. I need to make this one clear. Now, lastly, I would want to comment on one thing to do with, again, the indiscipline. Someone spoke about that this budget or the current or the budget behavior we have seem to be like a parasite that wants to kill
the host.
There is one scenario that I've been pushing for, and it is not palatable. Right now, when a tax man comes to you and he says, you are supposed to pay 2 billion, and you say, but I'm supposed to pay 1 million, and there is a discrepancy in the figures, and you are not agreeing, this tribunal that is supposed to listen to your appeal and look into the matter, in this ongoing bill was saying you must pay first before they hear your case.
You must pay 30%?
30% of that money that is being disputed.
Yeah, I had them on the show some time back.
Does that show you?
You first have to pay
30%.
before they hear you out.
Now you pose a question. That's why I say there is a discrepancy between reality and ideal. Now pose a question in a company, where is this money coming from? It means you have got to run to a bank and borrow non-productive loan equivalent to 30%, deposit it
with the tax tribunal.
Now, someone whose job was to just tick a box on targets will get this 30% and continues tick a box. But now, where is this money coming from? Have you ever been to a boardroom where you hear people approve equity for put aside in case there is contestation on appeal? That means that whether they have erred in auditing process or not, you must accept. That is indirectly what it is spelling out. And we are saying, look, it means in this economy, there are people who must be listened to as per the law of natural justice, and there are those who must never be listened to. So that is why we are saying I agree with someone who is suggesting a caller. Is he Juma? Jim, I think it was Rwanga, who says that you want the cow that you, Mr. Tick, you are on to die. But if the cow dies, what happens? So these are the scenarios we are saying. Budget, in my view, 3 areas. We interrogate the revenue, we interrogate the expenditure, we interrogate budget management as well. Those are the 3 cornerstones of budget management.
All right, thanks for the show, this very informative show. Thanks, Spectrum, for this very informative show. The truth be told, there are many leakages in our economy, plus financial indiscipline on the part of those who are supposed to implement those good policies. What can help our leaders cultivate a culture of fragility and ruthless efficiency? That's a comment that comes in from Mosei Michael, who wants to know what can we do to ensure that our leaders cultivate that culture of frugality and ruthless efficiency. Dr. Julius, Mr. Julius Mukunda.
You know, I'm just listening to those comments. Almost 99% of them are on fiscal indiscipline. That there is the public is not feeling the budget, despite all these trillions we are talking about. The people are not feeling it in their pockets. There is no money for Kameza. Kameza is no longer there. In fact, one person said that even the Kameza itself has gone. And I think we need to reflect on when we are collecting this money, how we collect it and also how we spend it. In terms of collection, to add on what he said, I think I have 2 points to make very for me to deliver. One is, when you are going to tax somebody, just imagine how they are going to survive after that.
All right.
For example, if you are going to tax somebody's withdrawals, mobile money, and say to pick money you will pay, you are really killing the whole idea of cashless economy or financial inclusion. But also, if you make the gadgets that can help people transform businesses, like these small, like the cheap phones, the entry cheap phones, make them very expensive, yet they can survive from that.
All right.
You are really pushing people on the way. So, in terms of taxation, let us think people first.
Okay.
The second item is...
Lastly, in a few seconds.
We need to deliver on time and on budget.
Okay.
When we talk about this project and say a road is going to be constructed, and you say 3 years, do it 3 years.
All right. With that, we come to the end of Spectrum. I must thank you, gentlemen, for sparing time to be here, and you, the listener, for tuning in, but also contributing with your insightful thoughts, questions, and comments. Tomorrow, same time, another topic will be on the air. But from me and the gentlemen in studio, we wish you a fabulous evening. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, because the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano is up next. Thereafter, the Soul Train with BP Junior.